Hello and welcome to our presentation. My name is Celia Watson and I am the Community Education Coordinator for Boston Ballet's Adaptive Dance Program. And I'm very excited to be here with you today for our presentation titled Creating an Inclusive Dance Studio.
Thanks, Celia. I'm excited to be here too. My name is Jamie Brege, and I'm the former assistant principal for Boston Ballet School, and I am currently the teacher, trainer, and consultant for the Adaptive Dance Program. Let's get right going. Thanks, Celia. So the goals for this presentation are pretty simple. We want to provide information on how to prepare staff, participants, and the actual studio space to be very inclusive for anybody who wants to come and be a part of your programming. We want to provide suggestions for instruction and delivery of a dance curriculum. And of course, we want to have this serve as a launch pad for developing a greater inclusive dance community in Boston and beyond. Thanks, Celia. So it all starts with a mindset shift. How can you be supportive of everybody's learning and welcoming anybody into your space? Recognizing that everyone has unique and specific needs, that diversity is the norm and not the exception, and thinking about what barriers to access there could be versus blaming an individual saying that they're not able to come into your space. What barriers are there and within your studio that you can break down in order to welcome more people in. And then changing instruction versus changing the student. How can you adapt as a teacher in order to support learning for the most amount of students? Thanks, Celia.
Great. So one aspect of creating an inclusive dance studio is using inclusive language and communication. So what this comes down to is what you say, how you say it, as well as other suggestions for how to be most respectful and inclusive when working with students or individuals with disabilities. So here at Boston Ballet, we really focus on individual-based language that is strength-based and emotionally neutral. So, for example, we would say a person who is blind or a person with low vision versus a blind person. Similarly, we would say a student with autism versus an autistic student. Again, placing the person before the disability is really crucial in establishing that. You also want to have a neutral tone, looking at the person directly in the eye, not looking to their caregiver or their family member. Being able to have that eye-to-eye contact is really important for establishing communication and respect. And also acknowledging the use of communication devices. Perhaps someone uses an augmentative and alternative communication device to communicate. Be open to that and be open to accepting and using other ways to communicate besides verbal language. Again, we also don't want to confuse communication with competency. So if someone does not communicate in a way that you might typically expect, or if they use a device, that does not mean that they are not understanding what you are saying. It means they are just communicating in a way that is different from you, and it is still communication.
Thanks, Celia. So this leads us to the universal design for learning. And it actually began as a concept for architecture and physical space. And it has the idea of how can you create a space that meets the most number of users, that is the most user-friendly. So when thinking about curriculum and thinking about designing a dance class, it's an approach that means that there's multiple means of representation. There's multiple means of expression and action. There's multiple means of engagement. And there's a total language approach. So you see it, you say it, you do it. And there's so many different access points to support learning for a variety of people that are in your class. Thanks, Celia.
So in creating an inclusive dance studio, you first want to start with, how do I prepare my staff? So maybe that's you as a staff member, an administrator, and also thinking about the teachers, faculty members, musicians who you might have working in your classes. So the first step that we take in our dance program is that we conduct intake interviews with all new families entering the program. So during the intake interview, it is a phone conversation between an administrator and the family member to talk about the program, go over expectations, learn some information about the child, and specifically related to any needs regarding communication, behavior, physical needs, sensory needs, and any other motivators or interests, all of which can really benefit the faculty member or their teacher before dance classes start. So everyone has the information they need to feel supported and successful in the classroom before classes begin. It's also really important to have context and awareness of some of the financial strains on families of children with disabilities or adults with disabilities, knowing that there are a lot of medical needs often the case, which can add a financial strain to families. So where possible, providing financial assistance can really help reduce those barriers and create more accessible programming. You also want to be very responsive and dependable as a staff member and really listen to the needs of the families. A lot of this comes from the awareness, for example, of myself being a typical person working with people with disabilities. I myself do not identify with having a disability, so how can I, as a staff member in this context, deliver as much support by listening to their needs? You never want to assume what someone wants or needs. Lastly, you want to make sure all of this information is communicated with your faculty. So that's by holding professional development before the start of the year, reviewing the intake interview information, and then looking at your curriculum and lesson planning and creating access from there. So once your staff are prepared, you also want to prepare your participants for coming into the studio. So the one of the ways that we do this with the Boston Ballet is we have social stories, and you'll see at the right of the page, there is a photo of our adaptive dance students wearing the dance uniform, which is a black t-shirt and black leggings. And below the photo, it says, "I will wait in line for my turn to dance." So the social story is a preview guide that helps prepare families for their experience in coming into the studio and to really help with the transition of experiencing the studio for the first time. It's also important to have events like open houses to learn more about back to school events, talking with current families, and also having observation weeks for families to come into the dance studio, see what is happening in class to learn more about the program. So before classes begin, you want to make sure that your physical space is set up in a way that is accessible. So removing any distractions like excessive noise, maybe there's some really loud, colorful photos that might be distracting or posters. You also want to be strategic about your use of chairs. Maybe you have chairs for a break space, you use chairs in the dance studio, just providing options for different ways if people want to take a break. You also want to have transition time built into your classes and class schedule. So it might take some time for families to come into the hallway. What if someone is late? Just being flexible with that, and also planning for wait time from students and families as well. Lastly, you want to consider what are some of the sensory considerations going into building your dance class. So I mentioned anything like loud noises, but we're specifically looking at anything to do with light, sound, scent, tactile, visual, and attire. So if there is a fire alarm going off, if the music is too loud for dance class, how can you as a staff member help accommodate those things and also listen if there are specific accommodations to be met? On the right, we have an image of a human, and there are 5 symbols surrounding it with different icons representing the 5 senses. We also have a focus on accessible attire in our dance classes, so students can wear a leotard, or they also have the option of wearing our adaptive dance t-shirt and black leggings or dance shorts.
Thanks, Celia. So now that you have your physical space set up, you have prepared your participants, you've prepared your staff, it's time to start dancing. So that goes into instruction on how to teach and prepare to teach inclusively. So looking at your goals. What are your goals for your class? What are your goals for the entire year versus the 10-week session in the fall versus one class at a time? And if you have a goal for each kind of benchmark throughout the whole session, then you can start planning backwards from there and really designing each segment specifically in order to grow and scaffold and build in order to support that, achieving that goal. So I already said this once, and I think I'm going to say it a couple more times before the end, but we say it, we do it, we show it, we sign it. So as you're demonstrating, you are speaking, you are singing, you are explaining, you're asking students to model for other students. If people use sign language in your class, making sure that sign is included in those instructions. And in that way, you're engaging the most amount of students all of the time. Having high and clear expectations is really important. Keeping directions clear, short, and single step, right? So if people know what's expected of them, not only just from a behavior standpoint of when I come into my dance class, this is how I need to behave, but what am I supposed to do when I get there? How am I supposed to dance? When am I supposed to dance? In which way, right? If things are very clear, short, single step, then people are willing and able to be vulnerable and take risks, and that's when you see growth happen. So in order to provide that opportunity for growth, repetition and review. You don't have to reinvent the wheel all of the time, right? So you can include the same steps in all 10 classes, and that idea of understanding and repetition, review, and mastery is so valuable in a dance class. That just is another way to say be consistent. Be consistent with your expectations, with your engagement, with your delivery of instruction, and with the actual movements, right? So making sure that if it's done one way, that it's always done one way so that the students understand what's going on and they can feel like they can take ownership of their bodies in space to music, which is the beautiful thing about a dance class. Encouraging at-home practice. So if you have songs available that you are dancing to in your class that you can provide to the families, then that's a really great way to encourage practicing between classes. Thanks, Celia. Next slide. So all of this instruction really can be supported by the use of props. So we at Boston Ballet use chairs, we use rubber floor markers, we use scarves, and one of the reasons we use chairs is that it provides a sense of containment and grounding. The students can find and hold on to that spot and really go back to it if needed. It avoids fatigue while building strength. And it also creates a sense of inclusion. If any students in your class use a wheelchair, then we all are dancing on the same level, right? And then rubber floor markers are also great. They can really serve to visually identify space and location. They can be used to create patterns and pathways that can be used throughout the space. And then scarves are so fun to dance with. They really support movers that might be apprehensive to dance by themselves, but if they dance with a scarf, then the scarf is doing the dancing for them. And it's a great way to engage more people in your class. It also provides an opportunity to include some more fluid movement if you have students with a lot of rigidity. Next slide, please. I think I have a couple more props. Yes, we love props. So we also use TheraBands. TheraBands can really develop strength And they're a really great sensory input with resistance. So even tying them on the bars while the students wait their turns to go across the floor, they can pull on that resistance band and kind of get that stimulation that is really, grounding and supportive. It can also create a barrier to contact. Instead of holding hands, students can hold a TheraBand on one end each. And so they're connected and they're moving together, but it's not that physical touch that sometimes is nervous and makes people uncomfortable. Stim toys can also be used. Those are definitely something that can create safety and structure and provide comfort and coping for students that need that extra stimulation. Definitely use strategically throughout the class if there's a little rumbling going on, as we call it, to help kind of redirect and focus the energy of that specific student or the class as a whole. And then finally, we love to use instruments. That connection to music and dance is just so intertwined, and providing an opportunity maybe through individual tambourines or rhythm sticks provide that sensory input that helps develop musicality. Thanks, Celia. Next slide. And finally, the use of visual aids in your class is really important because establishing that structure and schedule is important. So on the right of the screen, you can see an example of a schedule, as well as actually two different examples of a schedule, right? And this visual support of learning is really beneficial because everyone likes to know what's happening now and what's coming next. And so having something prepared and used throughout class helps students understand where they're going next. Why are they doing this first? And then next comes the fun free dance at the end. So that's really helpful to use that first then language. First we do our warm up, then we get to travel across the floor. And if you say it and they see it on the schedule, they understand the order of things. So that previewing, that supportive of the see it, say it, show it, do it, learn it, right, sign it, that is just reiterated all of the time through these visual supports and schedules. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think we've made it to our end. This is just the beginning. We wanted to share these tips with you. And so thank you for being here and for listening and engaging. I can't wait to connect with you more and have dance be such an inclusive experience for so many people. Celia?
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie. It's been a real pleasure to be here this year with the Able Assembly. Please feel free to reach out to either Jamie or I. Our email addresses are listed on this slide, or also check out our Adaptive Dance Program webpage, where we have the most up-to-date information on our program, as well as additional training opportunities. And lastly, to close, we have an image of one of our teaching assistants who is an adult with Down syndrome assisting another student, younger student with Down syndrome in one of our classes. So thank you again for joining us and enjoy the rest of the conference.